Good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, December 10th, 2020, and I had quite a lot to say last night, and I don't have quite as much to say this evening, so with your permission, I'd just like to go ahead and just get going. So, as we have been reading from this week, Erma Bombeck, Family, the Ties That Bind and Gag. It was my fourth trip to the garage since one son had transferred the snake from the utility room to the hood of my car. This time I had 3 phone books to add to the top of the cage. "What are you doing, Mom?" asked his owner. "You giving those phone books the pitch?" "They're for the snake," I said. "Trust me when I tell you he doesn't have a soul in town to call." "That's not funny. I'm making sure he doesn't escape." "Geez," he gasped. "You already have a bag of cement, 2 50-pound weights from the weight bench, and a car battery on top of the cage. If it ever caves in, you'll kill him. And every time you try on a pair of pumps in I Magnin, you'll wonder if it was your son's friend." "I don't know why you're doing this to me," I whined. "You know how terrified I am of snakes. Remember that time we stopped by the road in Michigan on vacation? I was a nervous wreck." He sat on the garbage can with his feet drawn up under his chin. "We sure had some interesting times on vacation, didn't we? That summer in Maine and that dude ranch in Indiana. It was always good for you and Dad to get away, I guess, but it was sure tough on us kids. We had to sit there in the back seat like statues, afraid to breathe. We couldn't talk, we couldn't move, just ride. The 3 of us cramped together like sardines used to envy you and Dad, laughing and talking with nothing to do but ride and read the road map, remember?" Remember? I was not likely to forget the hitchhiker who, after 20 miles, wrote us a check to let him out of the car. God, how I envied him. Those trips were like death marches. A lot of families play games in the car to pass the time, like Count the Cows or out-of-state license bingo. Our children played a game called Get Mama. It was a 400-mile nonstop argument that began in the driveway and didn't end until I threatened to self-destruct. Through scenic highways, majestic mountains, and amber waves of grain, they argued. They argued for 75 miles on whether or not you could run a car 100 miles in reverse without stalling. They debated how workers in the U.S. Treasury Department could defraud the detectors by putting $100 bills in their mouths and not smiling until they got past security. They argued about whether or not you could use a yo-yo on the moon and whether or not hair would grow over a vaccination. They discussed at length what, if a nun were allowed to become a priest, would you call her father? They threatened to slap a minimum of 55 times and punch an 85 times and I'm telling 149 times and whispered, "I'll give you one where it hurts too many times to count." The only bright spot I can ever remember was once when I slumped against the door and it wasn't closed all the way and I nearly fell out. It amazes me how every year a childless writer will set down suggestions on the joys of traveling with children. One article I read recommended you put pillows, snacks, a change of clothes, and some of the children's favorite toys inside the car where they can be easily reached. Plan for rest stops about every 2 hours, and, if possible, take a brief walk on those stops. Once back on the road, talk about what they saw and did during each stop. Use your imagination for other kinds of entertainment. Play guessing games and sing songs. Well, if that doesn't make you want to go right out and rent a child for your next trip, nothing will. But you're not talking to an amateur. I have traveled with children for the last 20 years and have been in 3 rest homes and 2 encounter groups, have written 15 letters to Dale Evans asking for spiritual guidance, and was in analysis 2 years after I admitted abandoning a 10-year-old in a roadside gift shop. I have a few suggestions of my own. The pillow is a great idea. The first one who whines, make him stop looking at me, gets it right over the face. As for commercial games and toys, forget 'em. Children usually like to make up their own. In addition to Get Mama, there's Name That Thud. With her head turned toward the window, Mom has to guess what is making Robbie cry out in pain. There's Window Roulette, where all the bodies in the back seat are airborne, trying to get a seat by the 2 windows. Other cars will often slow down to watch this one. I personally like Statue, a takeoff on the old summer game where mom reaches over the back seat, gives each child a rap, and no matter what position the child lands in, he must remain that way for the next 200 miles. If you encourage a child to share with you his observations of the last pit stop, be prepared to hear language from a restroom wall that will make your radiator boil over. Frankly, I have some questions about jamming a family into a car together for a couple of weeks in pursuit of happiness. It has been explained to me 1,000 times, but I still don't understand why it is that men feel obliged to start a vacation at 4 in the morning. I mean, what good are breathtaking colors of the Smoky Mountains in the dark? How can you feel the pulse and excitement of New York City when a passed out wino is the only thing on the street? What good is a vacation if you can't keep awake through lunch? We were the first family ever to see America first by headlights. Every morning before hitting the road, we would be awakened by the sound of the alarm going off in the middle of the night. Picking my way through the darkness, I'd guide arms and legs through clothes. It was like threading a needle with spaghetti. As the kids continued to sleep, I'd walk them to the car and arrange them in the back seat. They never awoke asking, "Where are we?" It was always, "What time is it?" They could never play games like other children played, like count the Chevys or out-of-state license plate rummy. There weren't any cars on the road. We'd sit there like zombies, listening to the hog and grain markets on the car radio, trying to figure out which meal we would spoil if we ate a candy bar. Once, we stopped at a roadside park for a potty break, and I hooked my sweater over the hood ornament to keep from falling down. About the same time, a station wagon pulled in with another family. They looked terrible. The kids stumbled along with blankets dragging on the ground and their hair uncombed, their eyes puffy and glazed. The woman and I didn't say anything at first. Our eyes met in that rare moment of understanding. There was no need to speak. Finally, I whispered, "Courage, sister." I think of her often. I wondered if she married a man who regarded asking for directions anywhere as a genetic weakness. I wish I had a dime for every clover leaf we circled for 8 days. "Dear," I'd suggest, "why don't you ask directions from someone?" "Because I am not lost," he would say. "That's the difference between men and women. Women don't like to figure things out. As soon as they see a cow in a field, they panic and right away start asking directions." It was only the first of many trips where we wandered aimlessly about the countryside, too lost to last and too proud to ask. We explored every dead-end road in the United States, blazed trails where only covered wagons had been, and discovered maternity homes for blood-sucking mosquitoes. I wondered if she too married a man with kidneys the size of basketballs who never felt the need for a bladder stop. Whenever I broached the subject, I was always told, "You're bored. You need something to do. Why don't you figure out where we are?" In truth, I stopped reading road maps in 1977 when my husband accused me of moving the Mississippi over. In truth, I stopped reading road maps in 1977 when my husband accused me of moving the Mississippi River over 2 states. It wasn't the first time he yelled at me for tampering with locations. We once quarreled over whether a prominent arch was a McDonald's or the gateway to St. Louis. Another time, we had an ugly scene when I wrapped my gum in the Great Lakes and we couldn't find our way to the Great Canadian border. Reading road maps is like being vice president. You wear navy and you keep your mouth shut. Sorry, I'm just reflection. This is such a time capsule. Between road maps and the function of a vice president. Sorry. Just had a moment there. The only time you are consulted is when the driver is approaching a fork in the road at 55 miles an hour and shouts, "Okay, you wanted to drive, now which way do we turn?" It's funny, but the anatomy of our life together can be summed up in the roadmap experience. The first year of our marriage, I told my husband I got nauseated when I read in a moving car, and he laughed and said, "Sweetheart, I don't want you to do anything, but just sit there and talk to me. Just leave the driving to me." A few years later, when we had 3 children fighting over 2 car windows, he started to delegate things for me to do. One was to keep those kids from killing one another. A few years later, he added, "Entertain them or give them a sedative." And then one day, he said, "Start looking for the turnoff." When I said I didn't know what turnoff he was talking about, he said, "Look in the glove compartment for the map. It's marked." "You know I get nauseated when I read in a moving car," I said. For the next 10 years, I was never to see another monument, scenic wonder, Stuckey's, cathedral, sunset, or spacious sky. I sat for hours, hunched over a mural of wavy lines, little circles, numbers too small to read, and distances too long to care. I was to discover road maps made people say things they did not mean. We missed Fort Lauderdale. That's what I'd expect from a woman whose mother swims out to meet troop ships. Oh, sure, I'll get in the left lane. When you get out of the sack in the morning and make my breakfast, I'll get in the left lane. So which way do I go, Irma? Left or right? I'll give you a hint. You pat the dog with your right hand, you dry your fingernails out the car window with your left. It's been 10 years since I stuffed a road map up his nose. 10 years of riding in silence. That is not to say there is peace in the back seat of the car. Children do not go on a vacation to have a good time. Don't I know it? If parents really wanted them to have a good time, they would leave them at home. Each rebels in his or her own way. No self-respecting family would think of going on vacation without the seat kicker. The seat kicker is a forerunner of the bionic leg. He positions himself just behind Daddy's seat and has been clocked at 200 kicks per minute for as long as 400 miles. The motion affects his hearing. And not to be missed is the child we call the hysteria connection. You have just turned on to the freeway when she leans over to where Daddy is smiling in anticipation of a week without pressure and says, "Did you mean to leave the garden hose running, Daddy?" Daddy will not smile again on this trip. She hears a strange knock in the engine that was the same knock her friend Robin heard just before the transmission went out on their car. She hears a newscast issuing tornado warnings for the place you are headed. She notes that the farther you go, the higher the price of gasoline gets, and her asthma seems to be getting worse, and she probably will not be able to breathe in the cabin you have rented. Occasionally, she turns to her brother and says, "Did you tell Mom about the cat you have hiding under your bed?" Or to her sister, "Everyone who's been accepted as state next fall has been notified by now." She hears sirens before anyone else in the car and smells burning rubber. She assures her mother that the Ryans dog had a hysterectomy and she got fat too. And just when you think the hysteria connection has dispensed all the good news a family can stand on a vacation, she says, "I didn't want to mention it, but when Daddy was hiding the key under the flower pot by the door, I saw a man watching him from the parked car across the street." But then she adds cheerfully, "I wouldn't worry. I've been exposed to measles, and if I'm on schedule, the rash should appear tonight, and we should all be coming home tomorrow." All of this makes you wonder why you cleaned out the fireplace, sucked the dust out from under the freezer, glued the tile down in the bathroom, fluffed up all the pillows, bought new underwear for the entire family, and ate 3 black bananas before the house sitter came. Maybe to give your kids something interesting to remember. Throughout the years, it has come to be known simply as the closet experience. Kids haven't been home unless they've pawed through their old sports trophies and ribbons, 2,080 friendship pictures from grade school, rubber worms, dolls with no eyes, graduation tassels, rugs from Disneyland, pennants, report cards, sand-filled cameras, basketballs, kites, dog-eared letters, college catalogs, and license plates. It was a monument to another myth. As parents, we had always been led to believe that you didn't lose a daughter or a son to an apartment, you gained a closet. When our children were younger, sometimes my husband and I would sneak into their bedrooms as they slept. We would gaze into their closets, and I squeezed his hand and smiled. "Just think, dear, one day all of that will be yours." We fantasized about the time each of us would have a rod of our own for our clothes, a shelf without Christmas decorations, floor space without boxes marked rain-soaked Halloween masks and Lucky Gym shoes. It never happened. Their apartments were too small to hold their treasures, so they stored them at home and visited them with some regularity. "What are you digging for?" I asked, wading through a room of boxes and old tennis rackets without strings. "God, Mom, you didn't throw away my old baseball cards, did you? They're worth a fortune. Do you have any idea what you can get for a Pete Rose with a burr haircut?" "She threw away a box of my albums, which would have been classics and snatched up by Sotheby's," said his brother. "You don't know that," I said. "Mom, the lyrics were clean." "All I know is I am sick of saving all this mess. I feel like Miss Havisham in Great Expectations watching the mice nip at the wedding cake." "Mom, this is our history. It shows that we were here." "Your father and I live at poverty level. What more proof do you need that you were here?" Why don't both of you just toss some of this stuff out the next visit? Just make a little stack here by the door and I'll get rid of it. I mean it. A couple of hours later, I walked in the room to turn off the lights. A pathetic little stack of memorabilia was rounded up by the door. On top was a royal blue graduation gown and a mortarboard with the tassel of the school colors. Our first high school graduate. What a year that was. No matter how much we budgeted, no one could ever have prepared us for the Ides of May. No one ever told us that in May your child wakes up in the morning with her hand outstretched, and every sentence is prefaced by, I need. The education that you thought was free back in September isn't. I need $12 for the book I lost. I need $6 for a ticket to the baseball playoffs. I need $3 for a present for Miss Weems, who is retiring. I need your gas card in your car to drive to a party. I need $40 to sand a desk that someone who looks like me carved my name on. The kid who dressed like a wino for 12 years suddenly has a social life which requires a wardrobe. I need heels for senior dress-up day. I need makeup for the class picture, even though I'm in the last row. I need a dress for awards day. Parents who support a high school graduate in the final days of May should be eligible for graduation relief benefits. Before you kick in for a senior send-off, you better be sure he or she is going. I need a car of my own to show everyone my parents love me. I need a $200 suit to wear under a graduation gown. I need a yearbook. I need $100 to go to dinner before the prom. I need rental fees for my tux. I need money for flowers. I need money for graduation pictures. The pictures are delivered in April. By June, the cap and gown have been stuffed in a closet. The diploma is jammed in the back of the baby book. The film of the graduation is in the camera and will remain there until the birth of the graduate's first child. The embossed thank you notes are lost. There is only one reminder left of that glorious day when your child filled you with such pride. 192 friendship pictures. When your child ordered 200 of them in February, you would have thought he would have mentioned that he only had 8 friends. But not a word was said. How could you have possibly known that he was such a loser? How do you unload 192 friendship pictures? Those of us with a cheap ethic can get pretty creative. I began by sending them to anyone who had ever spoken to me or looked at me like he wanted to speak to me. I sent them to strangers in the phone book who had our same last name. I sent them to creditors, like the gas and phone companies, with my check. For a while, I used them as tips. Remember, young man, there's more of those where that came from. I pasted them on the back of my letters and inked Preserve Wildlife underneath. I stuck them to the back of restroom doors with our phone number underneath. Eventually, some of them were preserved in plastic to become coasters, and several of them found their way as a border around a bathroom mirror. I took one out of my billfold and wrapped my gum in it one day. My luncheon companion was shocked. She had no idea I had 78 of them left. I need money for a class ring. Every year, millions of class rings are ordered by millions of high school graduates, yet no one ever sees them. What happens to them? Class rings are what are lost before your check for them clears the bank. They are what you take off every time you wash your hands the first week you have them, and after that they are never seen again. Class rings are what make the strange noises in your washing machine and what you paid $35 to a washer repairman to retrieve from under the pulsator. They are what you wear to bed, and your hand swells, and everyone gives you advice on how to get them off, and when you lather up your hands with soap, they fall in the commode. Class rings, belonging to boys, are what dangle from chains in cleavages of girls as a promise to spend the rest of your life together if you go to the same college. Class rings, belonging to girls, dangle from the first knuckle of the baby finger of boys who say they'll wear them forever and are later found in their gym bag. Class rings are what multiply, grow feet, and appear in the knife and fork drawer, the sewing basket, tied to the blind cord, and in the corner of the bathtub. Sometimes they turn green. I need money for the prom. In the movies, it's always a big scene. The boy picking up the girl for the prom will have a box containing a corsage in his hand. He's standing at the bottom of the stairway looking awkward and uncomfortable talking with the girl's parents. Suddenly, she appears. Their little girl, has emerged from her pigtails and jeans into a woman in a long, flowing dress. She has usually developed a bust of unbelievable proportions, and the braces are off her teeth. Everyone is struck speechless as a 68-piece orchestra comes out of the woodwork, and she makes her poised entrance. It's a great scene if you're the mother of a daughter. But no movie has ever filmed the scene in which a son emerges from the bathroom on prom night wearing white tux and tails, an ascot tie, wing collar shirt, top hat gloves, patent leather shoes, and a walking cane looking like he just fell off a wedding cake. There are no violins with a son. No magic moment when your eyes meet and there are tears in them. No moment when you throw your arms around him and declare him full grown. Our boy runs around like he has starch in his underwear. He tries to be cool about the outfit, but you know him well enough to see the anxiety. Will the toilet tissue clot the blood on his face that he caught when he cut himself shaving? Will his palms sweat when he dances? Was that spot on the jacket there before he brought it home? Will the corsage smell like the garlic and the spaghetti next to it in the refrigerator? Will he have enough money for the restaurant? Suppose he has to write a check at the restaurant. Will they cash a check for someone who has no checking account? Will he end up killing the jerk who talked him into a white satin tux with no pockets? With the son, it's corny to take pictures. Besides, he's late. You have to remember it all. The peck on the cheek, the slam of the door. You run to the window to watch him climb into a rented limousine that is parked in front of your house and the two houses on either side. It cost more to rent than a week in a cabin at Hawk Lake, but he threatened to self-destruct if he had to appear in public in a station wagon with a bumper sticker that said, "Have you hugged your children today?" You had to rent it for him, as he didn't know how to spell limousine. The mystique of the boy-turned-man lasts until you reach the bathroom. Heavy steam settles over 15 Band-Aid wrappers, 8 wet towels, foam-covered sink, 3 razor blades, shampoo and soup oozing down the drain, garment bag, boxes, tissue, and a bill for $56.75 impaled on the shower head. The child lives! I need money for a cap and gown to graduate. If you are naive enough to believe all men are created equal, just go to a graduation exercise sometime and look at the graduates all dressed alike. For a ceremony that's supposed to be universal and dedicated to the principle of conformity, it's a crock. Even in academia, there is no democracy. If you are short, if you have a chest, or if you have a head that is not flat, forget it. Commencement exercises are not for you. The gowns are basically one size fits all. All of what? All of whom? No one knows. True, the arms are ample. I only knew of one girl who had to let the sleeves out. The gowns themselves wrinkle when the lights hit them and hold heat like a silo. The sleeves are designed to weigh down the collar so that halfway through the ceremony it shuts off the air to the windpipe, making breathing impossible. Graduation gowns were basically made for tall people who weigh no more than 80 pounds. If you are short, you will either have to keep your shoulders lifted or cross your arms over your chest during the entire ceremony. Speaking of chests, I used to wonder why pleats were a part of the traditional graduation costume. Now I know. Revenge. It's time to punish all the buxom girls who had 3 dates every Saturday and made their professors forget they were married and had small children. Pleats on a well-endowed girl make her look like she is about to faint backward. I've done a lot of thinking about mortarboards. I never went to see the man who invented them. I have never seen anyone wear one who was mentally capable of graduating. How they got to the heads of learned men and women is a mystery. I have seen women jam bobby pins and clips in them only to have them zing off. Some men have tried putting them on the back of or the side of their heads crushed over their hair. Millions of people attend graduation ceremonies every year all over the country to pay tribute to those who have attained academic excellence. Underneath that rented mortarboard and gown is a kid in shorts and an obscene t-shirt fighting to get out. The Ides of May was a force to be dealt with, and just when we thought it was safe to write a check again, she threatened, "I'm going to college and become a doctor." My daughter found me with my head bowed over the stack of disposables. "What are you doing with my graduation gown?" The boys cleaned it out of the closet. "Those sleaze buckets," she said. "Why don't they throw out their own stuff? That gown brings back a lot of warm, wonderful memories for me." My mind raced. She had appreciated all the sacrifice and the love that went into making her moments of high school so special. I wore this graduation gown to a Halloween party when I dressed as a pregnant nun with a sign around my neck. The devil made me do it, remember? You could die from the sentiment. Halloween. She was 4 years old, sitting at the dinner table. Her legs dangled like they were hollow. They cleared the floor by a good 20 inches. She divided her time between chasing a cherry tomato around the plate with a spoon and looking anxiously out of the window, pleading, "It's dark already. Isn't it time to go?" Her costume had been finished for a week. She couldn't wait another minute to put it on. First came the padding, large pillows secured with belts from everyone in the family, then large boots to disguise her feet. The baggy pants were next, held up by a rope threaded in the loops and a pair of suspenders. Charcoal covered the fat cheeks, and a bulbous nose looked incongruous to the small face. Large glasses, a large black mustache, and a red fright wig completed the outfit. It was a long drive, and a familiar one, as she sat on the seat in silence. As we turned the corner, we doused our lights and quietly eased onto the driveway to avoid being seen. "Can you breathe?" I whispered from the bushes. "Yes," she whispered back. I pushed the bell and jumped out of sight just as the porch light came on. The door opened and a big voice boomed, "Well, what do we have here? It's a beggar, Mother. Do we know any beggars?" From behind the red fright wig, the slouch hat, and the mustache came a small voice. "You'll never guess who this is, Granddad." Of all the holidays on a child's calendar, Halloween seems to be the best, to hold more magic than Christmas, more promise than New Year's, more fun than a birthday, and more pageantry than the 4th of July. It's supposed to be a prelude to a religious celebration of All Saints' Day, but no one will ever convince me it was not started by a group of mothers who were art majors and seized the opportunity to publicly humiliate the rest of us. I chose a bad neighborhood from the beginning. The real estate agent tried to warn me. He said, "See that mailbox next door to you? The one with the flowers and the butterflies hand-painted? Mrs. Walters did that. Freehand." I thought I could overcome women who shaped their hedges into farm animals, hand-smocked yokes for their daughters' dresses, and made necklaces out of old potato peelings. But it was Halloween that did me in. That one day when your children turn to you for your imagination and creativity. I knew I was in trouble when I saw a hand-carved pumpkin in the window across the street with capped teeth. The woman on one side of me had been sewing sequins on her daughter's fairy godmother dress since July. The one on the other side was dressing her son as a dragon with a smoke vent in his mask and a basket of dry ice around his neck. It was going to be another year where my kids would stand under a bright porch light with a brown bag over their heads, and someone would say, "What are they, Margaret? Am I missing something?" My next-door neighbor would never put her cat on her kid's head and tell him to go as Davy Crockett. She would never stick a couple of magazines under his arm and tell him to go as a magazine salesman. She would never dot her face with lipstick and send her daughter out as a contagious child, the worst idea I ever had. She would never spray paint her son green and tell him he's dressed as a leftover. As the years went on, picking a costume got tougher and tougher. Everyone dressed so weird and individual to begin with, it was hard to figure out who was tricking and who was treating. My husband still hasn't figured out the difference. He lives in Halloween past, when anyone who didn't come to the door in a three-piece suit or traditional dress was considered in costume. Last Halloween, the doorbell rang, and I heard him exclaim, "Well, what do we have here? Silver shoes, a fringe shawl, a comb in the hair. I got it! A Spanish dancer! Come here, Irma, help me guess who this is." "For crying out loud," I said, "it's Evelyn, picking me up to go to the shopping center." Minutes later, he ran to the door to discover a bald-headed man with an earring in one ear, a vest, and a tattoo under his right eye. "A pirate!" he shouted. "How about a nice popcorn ball?" "How about using the phone?" he grumbled. "My motorcycle broke down and needs a tow." There was a succession of disappointments, including a woman in moccasins, suede prairie skirt, and a headband, who he thought to be a Native American. She turned out to be collecting for UNICEF. And he got real excited about a little kid who had big eyes and was wrinkled, and who my husband assumed was an extraterrestrial being from another planet. He was our son's friend, who just dropped by after swimming practice and was shriveled. I never got over the sadness of his naivete. I only gave out one treat, he said, and that was to a kid who was dressed as a bum. He had a great costume, faded blue jeans with the knees out, t-shirt cut above the navel, shoes with holes in them, and a week's growth of beard and a backpack. Our son is still trying to figure out why his father met him at the door and handed him a popcorn bowl. In retrospect, I don't think there was any part of childhood so hard for my kids to relinquish than Halloween. They wanted it to go on forever. At first I thought it was a matter of how much humiliation they would endure for a crummy pillowcase full of popcorn bowls and bubblegum that turned your tongue blue. But it was more than that. They were someone else. After the land of make-believe came reality, and people who lived there didn't seem to have a whole lot of fun. So, they left the night of goblins and witches rather reluctantly. I noted that each year they took less time to dress and went out later. Then last year our son went out. He was dressed in a crew neck sweater and carried a calculator and a piece of brie. Give me a hint, I said. What are you supposed to be? A yuppie, he said. The kid could have driven to the bank, written his own check, and bought his own candy. How do you know when you're too old to go begging on Halloween? How about when the mustache tickles your mask and you can't stand to keep it on? Or when you can't chew the taffy apples because your partial plate might give way? And when someone gives you a kitten and you turn it over to say, "Are you crazy? It isn't even spayed." It's time. When a sensuous housewife answers the door and asks, "Do I know you?" and you answer, "No, dollface, but we can fix that," you're too old. When someone drops a shiny new penny in your bag and you rush right out and drag a porta potty to their front porch, you know you've lost the spirit. When you start begging at 11 at night and have to quit at midnight to pick up your date, give it up. You've graduated to a new plateau. When you're a pregnant nun running around in a Volkswagen in search of a party. So that is this night's Advent. And I will very much look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening at 10 o'clock Central.